Well, right now, Oregon's 2024 recruiting class is sitting at number 12 in the country. Can it get into top 10? Yeah, a couple names might help. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review. Please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're talking Cruton on this Friday. The season's right around the corner. That doesn't mean recruiting stops, so we have to bring back Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting insider at FBScout_Florida on Twitter if you want to go check him out. Brian, let's just get right to the heart of what I and many other Oregon fans are wondering right now. It was a number 9 overall high school recruiting class and portal class for the Ducks under Dan Lanning in 2023. We're looking at recruiting in 2024. They're sitting at number 12. Are they capable of bringing in a second consecutive top 10 class nationally?
Yes. Can I go home now, or is that
yeah, all right. Thanks, Brian. Great to hear from you. That's all we needed was the one word answer. Perhaps we should elaborate a little bit. How does Oregon get back into the top 10 and push towards maybe a top 5 range?
Patience is going to be number one. Several of the kids that everybody wants to know about, they're going to announce near signing day. I've said that 20 times on this show, and that's not going to change. Aiden Breeland, et cetera, would be fantastic for the Ducks. But so would a certain young man from Yelm, Washington, that you and I were just discussing right before the show. I love his film. It's one of the few guys at like 240 pounds that you can play at linebacker or running back, and it wouldn't matter. He is an animal. I think they're going to get him. They probably will end up with somebody that we're not even discussing right now. That is the history of Oregon recruiting. They'll flip somebody in the 11th hour. That is Oregon to a T. And I'm guessing they'll end up with one of the other higher rated kids. So I'm guessing somewhere between 7 and 10 will be their final finish.
When you say one of the other higher rated kids, are you talking about one of the top 20, 30 uncommitted players that are still on the board?
Well, yeah, like Baker and Breland are obviously,
okay.
But I mean, it's just, even if you get let's say a mid 4-star player, when you get between like 5 and 15 in the rankings, there's usually not a whole lot of difference. There's really not. So one player can make you jump 2 or 3 spots. Everybody looks at the number. That's not really how it works. And that's why I don't pay attention to that as much. Did you fill needs? Did you get impact guys? And did you get players at critical spots? Those are the things people need to look at. But people like to go to their office and say, my school got a better recruiting class than you. And that's why they talk about rankings.
Gotcha. Okay. So right now, Oregon's sitting at number 12 nationally, just a little bit behind Notre Dame, Penn State, LSU, Michigan, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Florida State, Bama, Florida, Ohio State, and Georgia are the 11 teams that are in front of them right now. Certainly getting their first 5-star recruit of the cycle would probably bump them up a solid amount. Most of the schools, not all of the 11, 6 have at least one 5-star kid in their 2024 class. So I think that if they were to land a Baker or a Breland, who we'll talk about here in just a moment, that would, I think, give them perhaps the sights, the goals, put them in the range of finishing maybe top 5, top 6 in the country. Yes?
Oh, 100%. You got to remember, those are guys that their point systems for 247 on 3, etc. It's plug and play, and their numbers are just higher. They're higher rated players, so they would definitely help the Ducks get inside the top 10.
Okay, so one of the names in that 5-star realm that we've talked about for a while is Brandon Baker, and I've heard recently that he's starting to trend away from Oregon, but that the Ducks are still in the running there. But it's a Texas, Nebraska, and I think there's one other school that's kind of going after him right now. What have you been hearing on Brandon Baker?
I've been hearing the same stuff, but I don't put a lot of stock in it because that's a kid that's going to take his recruitment to signing day. I will bet you an Oregon State hat, which I know you just cherish, that his recruitment has at least a couple more twists between now and just mid-November let alone December. He's an NIL kid. Different packages are going to be offered. Getting all bent out of shape, good, bad, or indifferent about what he's doing right now does not behoove anyone. Texas has a massive NIL package because they got oil money. So I'm not surprised they trend for anybody, to be quite honest with you. But at the same time, let's see where he goes for visits this fall. If Oregon's going to get him, he's got to come back to campus this fall for a game. If they don't, I would bet money they don't get him, whether they were leading for him right now. But these kids want to see what it's like to be at a game. What do you think? Beyond the first game or so, how many really good home games does Oregon have this year?
Well, late in November, you've got USC.
Oh, that's quality.
I mean, the Colorado game will have some hype. I don't know that it'll actually be a great game per se, but that's the conference home opener in week 4. So that's kind of where I think there are a couple visits that we've talked about that are scheduled for that weekend, because what happens, the way Oregon's schedule works out, and it might not even be ideal for recruiting, frankly, is they have 3 home games in the first 4 weeks, but then they will have no home games for a calendar month. They will go a month between playing games at Autzen Stadium, because the way it works is they play on in week 4, they play Colorado at home. Then the next week, they are at Stanford on the road. The next week, they have a bye. The next week, they're at Washington. So by the time they come back and play Washington State in week 8, that's 4 weeks later. So there's just this big gap from the end of September to the end of October where they don't have a lot of home games, or they don't have any home games. And then they go back and forth home and road, and then they play 3 of their final 4 in the regular season at Autzen Stadium. I was going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, but since we're on it, does that make things kind of complicated for recruiting and scheduling visits? Because it feels like not a lot of kids want to schedule a visit in November.
That's a great question. I don't know exactly when the November rains of sorts start out there, but I know winter can be pretty brutal in certain parts of Oregon.
It's not always fun.
No, yeah, I've never been there, so I've just seen photos and video, and it doesn't look friendly. Do you really want to bring an LA kid to a rain game? No, but if the last game before that 4 or 5 week stretch, no matter who it is, I would bet you money Oregon staff tries to get kids in because of the weather. Every school is different. Like if you're USC, it's funny, like they play Notre Dame every other year, last game of the year. It rains in LA around Thanksgiving every time they play. The West Coast just gets rain that time. It just does. That doesn't mean they don't want to bring them for Notre Dame, but they'd probably rather 3-4 weeks before against some other team when it's sunny, especially for an out-of-state kid that wants to see the LA weather. Well, Oregon's beautiful most of the year. It's just that rain part. So they'll probably try to schedule. I would. I mean, why would you want to do it otherwise? Nobody likes getting rained on.
No.
Every school is different. I don't know, man. That's really weird. How did they go 4 weeks in a row? That's crazy. That's
just the way the schedule has shaped it. You'd have to ask the Pac-12 conference, which doesn't appear long for the road, as we all know. Yeah. So I think that's a difficult balance for them with Baker specifically, who does have visits lined up in September. He's got at least one to Nebraska, but I think if Oregon could get him back on campus, that would be advantageous. But I've heard some buzz from Texas with regards to Brandon Baker, that they're going after him hard, that Nebraska's in the running. Georgia's the other team that I'd forgotten that I think is still. I mean, it's Georgia. Of course, they're going to be in the running for the number 1 offensive tackle in the class.
They have 6 kids committed on the offensive line, for the love of mankind.
Oh, Georgia does?
Yeah, they don't.
Okay, well then let everybody else have some. Just every
and it's
now
not
and
like
then.
any of them suck either. I can assure.
No, I don't suspect that that they do. Another kid who definitely doesn't suck, quite the opposite, down at Mater Dei is Brandon Baker's teammate Aiden Breeland, who everyone I think in the Oregon world listening to or watching this show would like an update on, and we are most definitely getting to Aiden Breeland, and you are most definitely getting to game time, because If you are worried about getting tickets at the last possible moment, you don't have to with Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful, and Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. I'm a big stand-up comedy guy, if you did not know, and Game Time is the way that you want to get your tickets, whether it's sports or otherwise. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you are set, ready to go. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email and organize and screenshot or anything like that. That's why you should go check out Game Time, the fastest, easiest way to get your tickets. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Speaking of guarantees, the second segment sip to keep me going. It's a guarantee every single time. All right, let's get to Aiden Breeland. Brian's just shaking his head over here for those of you listening. He thinks I'm an absolute goofball, which is 80% true. So Breland is a guy who I would love for Oregon to get. I just have a vision of a defensive line that's got Mateo Uyunglele at an edge spot and Aiden Breeland on the interior and a bunch of other blue chip recruits that Oregon brought in the 2023 cycle, whether it's at the edge position, guys like Tatum Tuioti, who have been impressive during fall camp, or all the defensive linemen, Terrence Green, Amari Washington, Ashton Porter, just like keep going down the list, Johnny Bowens. Where is Aiden Breeland at, and is Oregon still squarely in the running?
They're in the running, but it's very similar to Baker. A&M, Miami, Oregon. I'm still waiting to hear like a new team. I don't know exactly how the game, like everything that I've known for the last 30 years is starting to change because of NIL. There could be a team that comes in for one of these kids or somebody else, but those are the same teams that I've been hearing. Nothing's new. Again, just like with his teammate, when does he get to campus again? Kids that don't visit again, probably not going to go. A&M and Miami have had multiple visits, etc. Let's see what Oregon does this fall. That whole deal with the whole month is still bothersome to me because that just limits what they can do before the weather changes. They might try to get him in for the Colorado game or one of the other ones. These things change, but it would behoove Oregon to get him on campus sooner than later.
Yeah, we actually, it looks like, according to 24/7, got the last visit for Aiden Breeland that he took, and that was June 23rd. He took one to Texas A&M, Miami, and Georgia. We all know what those places are capable of recruiting-wise. We also know what Oregon is capable of recruiting-wise. And I feel like this is one of the guys that is going to be a joint effort recruiting-wise between Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy. It doesn't feel like it's going to be an either-or. I think this is the sort of guy that both obviously want and know they need. But, Tosh Lupoy is a defensive line guy within, that's his he was a defensive line coach in the NFL, and that's kind of where he comes from, and that's where he's always recruited really, really well. This is the sort of guy that you would like to see Lanning and Lupoy be able to land, but as you know, it'll be extremely difficult.
You just got to keep plugging. If you miss on a 5-star kid, whatever position, and you put your best foot forward, it is what it is. He can only pick one school.
Right.
So, if you think about it this way, recruiting is a lot like being a Major League Baseball player and trying to bat 300. It's still a low number, but it's good. That's what hitting on 5 stars is like. Not very many guys bat 300, but that's pretty much about as good as you're going to get. So closer to the Ducks at 300, the better they shall be.
That is a great way of thinking about it. And Breland or Baker. Baker's the number 21 player in the country in the 24/7 sports rankings, and Breland is number 35. So both top 40 guys. Either would be the highest rated recruit that Oregon has landed yet. But you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to circle back to Brayden Platt, the linebacker, 4-star out of Yelm, Washington, who looks like he is trending towards the Ducks. I've heard that from you. I've heard that from others. I see that on 24/7 with the crystal ball. So this looks like it is moving in the Oregon direction. Would you say your confidence interval is in the 70, 80, 90, 100% range? What are we looking at here?
Well, the way that predictions have gone for me in the last month or so, NIL and all that other stuff, it's almost a lock that he's going to Washington State now. Just because this is how bad it is. One of the kids that I've known for 2.5 years, know him personally, saw him the day of the commitment, face to face. Didn't give me any like significant information, but he had a top 4 out. One of them being Oregon. Signed or committed to UCF, Breedell Richards. So after that,
and you just had no idea. You got no indication, nothing.
If I didn't know,
nobody knew.
Yeah, like I know him personally. I've seen him play 30 times.
Oh man.
So these kids, just because they hate, it's a really tough deal. And I'll just give a little industry insider. The crystal balls or whatever, like there's different names for them for different companies. They make those companies money. Okay. The kids hate them because once it's out, it kind of runs their announcement. So I think the backdrop to that, because I've had this happen a few times, so-and-so sets his announcement date, puts up a list. There's a kid that committed to Georgia, didn't have his top 3. Breedell, and there's a few other kids, didn't put their name on a list with certain schools, but then committed to somebody else. They're doing that to throw these guys off. They're tired of everybody making the predictions. It's going to be harder and harder to project. I get very nervous now, very nervous about predicting.
Obviously, people listening to or watching the show are probably aware, and if you're doing so for the first time, especially on YouTube, you can probably see, I was not a high school football recruit. I wasn't even a high school football player. I was a high school football announcer. That's what I did. So, and that kind of translated. So anyway, my point is that if I were a kid in that position, I would rather have it be announced when I wanted it to be announced, not when somebody else wanted it to, because that's a significant moment in your life. That is
I'm not arguing with you. You're 100%.
Yeah, I'm just saying I understand it from the player's standpoint. If they're, I'm not accusing anyone specifically of doing this. You can correct me if I'm way off base, but like if they're like putting out misleading information so that when they commit, it actually means something and the announcement actually means something, I understand that. And I can't blame them for that.
That's where I'm at. But everybody wants to know now and everything in society, and it's because of this right here.
Yeah, that little magical device that's got more computing power than the thing that put a man on the moon in the 60s, which is still a crazy concept to me. But technology in general is a crazy concept. I mean, I've never met Brian in person, and he's like my best friend. I'm kidding. Brian hates me. But no, not quite. See, he's making a face. He's being nice about it. He's like, no, I don't hate you. Just get annoyed by you sometimes. But Platt, a guy who you said you like his film. If he does end up choosing the Ducks, he'd actually be the third 4-star linebacker of the class for Oregon, joining Kamar, Mothudi and Dylan Williams. So I think this would probably be the last linebacker commit. After Justin Williams went to Georgia instead of the Ducks, the 5-star linebacker they were after, top 15 player in the country, like you said, you're just not going to bat 1,000 with those guys because you're going up against some heavy hitters. But what do you like about Brayden Platt, and do you think that he's a different type of player compared to Mothudi and Dylan Williams?
He is nothing like either one of them. That's a good question to ask. He's 240 and he's done. Like he's
not growing, he's not getting bigger.
I mean, if he's getting bigger, I'm actually concerned unless he's going to put his hand in the dirt.
Okay.
After you get to 240, look, I don't care how talented you are. There are only so many running backs you're going to be able to cover, even at his size. Adding weight's not going to help the conundrum of it's 3rd and 6, 5'9", 170 comes into the game, and you got man coverage. I know who I'm taking. It's not the 240 guy. So, but he is really mobile. I mean, his power is ridiculous. I don't know when he started lifting, but I would guess it was 12, 13 years old. He's that kind of build. Like he is humongous. But he can break down and chase guys laterally after running full speed. And the other thing, if you really want to be entertained today, go throw on his huddle. There's some plays of him running the football against smaller school competition.
Funny,
I'm gonna let your mind
funny you bring that up. I was just perusing in another window here his profile, and one of those 98-yard touchdown carries popped up, boy, he runs really fast in a straight line for a guy who is 6'2", 240 pounds.
Yep. I mean, 30 years ago, like Lou Holtz might have recruited him to play fullback, or Bo Schembechler or somebody like that. He'd have been fine. But now there's not as much need for that. So linebacker is his deal, but in short yardage, H-back, fullback, I could see, and he can catch. He is an all-around athlete before you call him a football player.
Well,
really fun to watch his film.
Hey, when I played NCAA 14, a game I still play, by the way, I loved recruiting athletes. Those were the best guys to recruit because you could put them wherever they were needed. And I don't think Oregon has as much of a need at running back as you look to the future as linebacker. So that's probably where he ends up being with. Yeah, but hey, we handed the ball off to Noah Sewell against Colorado last year, and it worked quite well. So you never know. All right, last thing I wanted to talk about with you is recruiting during the season. Coaches have to balance now, and this is why they have massive staffs and they have people with full-time positions that are centered around recruiting. They're getting ready for a game. They're watching film. They're scouting. They're implementing schemes. They're doing everything like that. But Dan Lanning right now, and this is why he's now making $7 million a year, is he's trying to pull in a top 10 recruiting class. He's also trying to have a top 10 season in what is going to be the most competitive and deepest quarterback league in the country, maybe the deepest overall league in the country. I don't think we have the high-end teams of the Big Ten and the SEC, but I think as you go down the list, the conference is deeper than anybody else. He has to balance that while trying to recruit against those same schools. What is that like for a coaching staff? How involved in your time covering this are head coaches during the season versus how much do they just have to delegate because they have to worry about their opponent for next week?
The delegation is really unique. Lee Corso made this comment 20 years ago, and it'll hold true forever. I forget which guy it was, but somebody got hired at a major program in Oregon, Ohio State, whatever it was. And he was on the show, and he said the most important word for him is no. And I'm like, what in the world is Lee? I thought he was falling off a cliff. And he goes, he has to say no to boosters. He has to say no to interviews. He has to say no to everybody because he's got to coach and recruit. And Lanning's only second year, third year head coach.
Second year head coach.
So he's not going to be as streamlined as Saban, Urban Meyer anyway. And I know the financial department doesn't want to hear this, but he needs to do as little with gathering money for Oregon, which they're going to throw rocks at me from the West Coast for saying that and doing all those speeches and crap, like all of that. Any outside of Phil Knight calling him, everybody else got to go to the side. This is a very important season for them. They got Bo Nix, 5th, 6-year senior, whatever.
5th year, yeah.
Good team. They got at least an outside chance at making the playoffs. Eyes on the prize. And that means if he hasn't already, there's nothing you can do about the second part. You have to delegate to your staff. Lupoy and all the other guys, they have to do their job. A little history on this. Urban Meyer used to walk into offices and said, have you called, like they have a board? Have you called him yet? Have you talked to this guy? He would just walk in and do stuff like everybody's got their way to make sure they're motivating their staff to be involved with recruiting. But Urban can't just sit there and watch you make a video conference call. Neither can Dan. You got to trust your guys to do that stuff. He's game planning. He's talking to his quarterbacks, his offensive line, defensive line, all that stuff. He's only got so much time. It's about delegation. And that's why you've seen coaching salaries go up so much for these assistants. It used to be like 80, somebody made 85 grand as a head coach or something. Now it's like, that's what they get in 2 weeks.
Yeah. The days of coaches making 85 grand, that went by the wayside quite some time ago. But assistant salaries, I think, are a lot higher.
It's
like if you're a Power 5 position coach, depending on the school that you're at, you're making probably high 6 figures to maybe eclipsing $1 million. Coordinators certainly are. Like the highest paid, I think Tosh Lupoy is among the highest paid coordinators in the Pac, and he's like just under $2 million. The highest paid coordinator in the Pac-12 is Ryan Grubb at Washington, who they had to give.
He's your coach.
Yeah, he is, and he got a raise because Alabama wanted him to be their offensive coordinator. And he said, well, I'd like to be at Washington. And they said, yeah, we'd really like you here. Here's $2 million a year. Just for context, Jonathan Smith at Oregon State is making 4.5, I think, to be the head coach. But the coordinators now are getting so much more because everyone understands what their value is, right? In recruiting and developing those relationships. And I mean, there are kids throughout this class, I'm sure, that Dan Lanning's probably only spoken to once or twice, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many kids on the board because you offer 150 kids by like February. I mean, how many of them you're going to have a meaningful relationship with? You talk to everybody in some capacity or email or something, but there's a 30 to 50 player list that's a focus. It's everybody's the same. There's no way around that. Now, you can spend a little more time maybe with a few more, but again, you still got a game plan. You got to hire coaches. You got all these administrative duties, setting schedules, talking with it's being a head coach is about all the stuff nobody knows about. And you still have this thing called a family and or a child at home, etc.
Yeah, he's got a wife and 3 kids.
That's what I mean. Like he sees them once a week.
Yeah.
No, like he'll see his wife every day, but like especially younger children.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I mean the schedules just don't line.
They're already in
line
bed
up
by the
very well.
time Dan hits the door. He sees
Right.
his kids once or twice a week. That's it. That's every head coach.
Yeah,
Every assistant coach during the season. It's just the way it is. You choose football over family. There is no exception to that, or you will be out of football.
Well, a lot of people think that that's what Tom Brady basically did.
It isn't basically he flat out did. I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we know every single detail, but boy, it sure seems like Giselle wanted him to retire, and Tom said, "But I can still play football." And you're either all in or you're not. And I think we've got a guy in Dan Lanning who's all in, and we're very, very, very grateful to him and to his family for that as well. Always grateful to Brian Smith at FB Scout _Florida on Twitter, our recruiting insider here at the Locked On Network. Brian, great stuff today.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Appreciate all of you listening. I will see you next time. By the time I come back to you, it'll be game week. Can't wait. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.